Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TIFF press conference for TWIXT. I'm Maria Rowley, press conference manager. And before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Once we get everyone from the film standing on the podium, we're going to have about 30 seconds of flash photography. And we're going to ask that only pre-approved wire photographers stay in the room during the press conference. Please keep the center aisle and the side aisle clear for volunteers with microphones and questions. And please stand and identify yourself and your media outlet before you ask a question. Everyone make sure your cell phones are turned off. And just so you know, the press conference is being streamed live at www.tiff.net/festival. And it is now my pleasure to welcome the director and cast member from TWIXT, as well as our moderator, Richard Krause. Excuse me, thanks.
Where do you want me to sit, boss? Just sit there. Okay.
Look in the middle, please. That'd be great. Gentlemen, one down low. Gentlemen, over here, please. Guys, together. Thank you, guys. Hey, guys, can we get a room south of the house?
He said stand in the middle. There are three people. Yeah.
Right here, perfect. Gentlemen, right here, please, where my hand is. Right here. Down. Right here. And down over here, please. And just down here.
You're gonna be in the middle.
You like me in the middle? Okay.
You want me? You want to be in the middle?
If you'd like me, I usually sit here, but that's okay.
No, you be where you.
Mr. Cola right here.
Yeah.
And Francis, just put everybody. And Mr. Cola right here. And Val, and Mr. Cola. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll give the photographers a second.
Is it possible these bright lights can be
A little dimmed, yep.
so we can see whoever might be out there?
Sure, yeah. Can we get the overhead lights here dimmed just a little bit? I'll, you know what? Excuse me just for a sec. I'll get.
So possible to see who might be.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone. It's happening for us right now. Welcome, everyone, to the Toronto International Film Festival press conference for the film TWIXT. We have two very special guests tonight. One of the most innovative and influential of film directors, Francis Ford Coppola, won his first Oscar for co-writing the script to Patton. Since then, he has taken home 5 more, including the Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award for a body of work which includes films like The Godfather, Parts 1, 2, and 3, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now, One from the Heart, The Outsiders, Dracula, and most recently, Youth Without Youth, Tetro, and the film we're here to discuss today, TWIXT. Val Kilmer, who joins us, and I have to confirm this with you, but my research indicates that you turned down a role in the Francis Ford Coppola film, The Outsiders, because of a previous theater engagement?
Well, I didn't turn it down, I just wasn't available.
Okay. Since then, he has appeared in 80 movies, including classic turns as Iceman in Top Gun, as Jim Morrison in The Doors, Doc Holliday in Tombstone, Batman and Batman Forever, movies like Heat, The Ghost in the Darkness, and The Salton Sea, and Spartan, supporting performances in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and the film we're here to talk about today, TWIXT, as Hall Baltimore. Please welcome my guests. And it's lovely to have you both here.
Thank you.
And congratulations on the film. It was probably the most packed P&I screening that I've been to so far. People were fascinated to see this film. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Coppola, and ask about the dream that kind of started all this.
It was just as we've spoken. I had this dream in Istanbul, and it was a particularly vivid dream, and I was thinking while I was having it, oh, this is like a story, it somehow still had awareness while I was dreaming. And then there was the call to prayer, which woke me up. I was very frustrated because I wanted to, see what the dream had in store for me. And I tried to go back to sleep, but realizing I wasn't going to, I just kind of recorded what I had remembered, which was everything. If you jot down what a dream is a few minutes after it, you pretty much still have it alive in your memory.
right. And then it turned into a short story after that, right?
Not really. I mean, I had the transcription of the dream, which was the basis of when I write, I usually write in a screenplay. I write in a double-spaced, more. I don't write in a screenplay format because I like to be able to, say, oh, and then she thought such and such. I like to be more free in terms of getting down the ideas before it strictly has the discipline of a screenplay. So, it looked like a short story, but everything I do looks like a short story.
Right. Val, tell me what form then the script was in when you saw it for the first time. Was it still the sort of short story phase of it, or was it more like a film script?
Yeah, it was an outline. Yeah, but as Francis just said, it read like movies read. It just wasn't, in that format.
Right, right.
But the story was basically what you saw yesterday.
And what was it that grabbed you about it? Because the narrative, I'm assuming everyone here has seen it, the narrative is, it's an unusual narrative format, I think it's fair to say. So tell me a little bit about what your initial thought was then.
Well, it takes me a long time to understand his story because I just read it and I'm immediately attracted to what's happening to the characters. So you try to just be very sensitive at the first time you read a story or a screenplay, because you're kind of collecting your own, like Francis said about the dream, it's sort of the same thing for an actor. So this guy's a writer who's stuck, and I've been writing a screenplay for about 6 years, so it was very familiar territory, but it was just exciting and fun. There's so many great elements in it. Like the film, you're stimulated, you're not sure what genre you're in sometimes and whether it's real or whether it's part of a dream.
I thought my initial take on this film when I walked out of the theater was that there was a lot of joy in this movie. And given the subject matter, I think if you read it on the page, you might not think as a quick synopsis, because I don't think a quick synopsis can do this film justice, but I found there was just a lot of joy. And is that a reflection of doing a sort of more personal kind of film for you now, or?
Certainly, I also, I've been around a long time, and obviously one of the most frequent things I hear is, oh, well, the films you're making now are not as good as the films you were making 30 years and
Who would
ago.
say that to your face?
Everyone. And it's really simple. My answer is the truth. 30 years ago, those films you think were so good were not received well. The Godfather got a terrible review in the Daily Variety. I was crushed because I didn't understand how things work. And every film subsequent to that, I made The Godfather, The Conversation, and Godfather Part 2 and Apocalypse Now in a row. No one was saying, oh, you're making such interesting films. They were saying the opposite. You're saying, wow, that was the biggest disaster that has been made in Hollywood for 40 years. So 30 years later, they say, oh, those were interesting films. So I realize now the films I'm making today, I have to wait for 30 years to find out. And the truth is, I'm not going to be around in 30 years, so I'm never going to know. So that sort of is liberating in that I can kind of just, work in the cinema, which is a very joyful thing to work in because it's so young. You can learn so much from working in it. And, let the test of time be the real evaluation of the movie. I tell you, the screening I went to, I don't know what screening you guys went to, but the screening I went to had about 2,000 people, and I have never had such a wonderful and positive screening of a movie that I can think of, and the reaction was very, very gratifying. And I said, I guess this is the one opinion, but there's the other opinion you get. So that's what I guess the press screening was a different group. You said it was a big crowd?
Yeah, I saw it at P&I screening.
Did they laugh at all?
They did. People were laughing. People were enjoying it. People, I think, were kind of swept up in it. I think it may have taken them a few minutes to sort of adjust their eyes, but I think that but people were on side.
These were big audiences, so it's always, you always feel more comfortable when there's 2,000 people than when there's when there's 200.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, it was a wonderful experience for me yesterday. I was very happy that we had the response we did.
Val, you seemed like you were going to say something there, did you?
Just that you know, talk about the joy on the set, and Francis talked a lot about you know, when movies, they have a theme, and sometimes, like, my character doesn't really know what's happening. It's what the plot is. He's trying to find a good story. Yeah. So have a genius who's writing a story about not being able to find the story, but the guy is a hack. He just wants something to be successful, but then he runs into Edgar Allan Poe, who's talking only and exclusively about the truth, and a really, surprisingly, if you study him as a character, a deep thinker, very serious man, but you know, full of love. He lost his young wife, and so Francis and I talked a lot about loss. Both of us have suffered that, and that's what the character is leading to, which is pretty heavy stuff. But like my character, he's just looking. We're all just looking for a way to survive. And it made I guess, playing important. Like that's what the story's about for me personally. More than loss, it's about creativity. Finding your story is the same thing as finding a good story. It ends up being the same thing if you do it right.
Right. I'm going to turn it over to the press. I'll start here. Yeah.
Hi, Laszlo Christian, Australia, Screen Hub and Hungary Vox Movie Magazine. Wondering, what's your take on dreams? Are they just figments of our imagination, or is there a reality to them? Perhaps do they lead us to another level of consciousness, collective subconsciousness, or even to the other world, as we often dream about departed ones? Because you mentioned loss.
Well, you know, if it weren't for the fact that we keep coming back to the same life, more or less at the same point, you would think that this is the dream and that's the real life. You know, we know so little about consciousness and existence and what the real story is, that we can only have fun during our lives and try to speculate and figure it out. But I sleep very well, and I have a nice dream life. I look forward to my dreams. They're usually not scary, or although I like everyone, I have anxiety dreams. You know, something I'm worried about that's expressed in a dream. But you know, it does seem that we need that time in a state of sleep to kind of readjust all the emotions we're going through and the impressions. And now that we're sort of facilitated that through, you know, this knowledge and information change in our lives, there's more to process, because we're sort of working harder just because it's been made more facile. But I know there have been some good works on dream. I know D.H. Lawrence wrote about, other people have written about. I haven't made that study, but I am fascinated with the dream life.
Bruce? Right behind you.
That's right. Good morning. It's Bruce Kirkland of the Toronto Sun Media across Canada. And I was at the Princess of Wales cinema, and so that relates to a part of my question. I was astounded at the boating accident scene and Mr. Kilmer's scene after that, which I won't go into detail because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen the film yet, because it was so remarkably personal. And then after the screening, you talked about how certain parts of this film came back, and I think you said, bit you in the ass.
It bit me, but...
I'm sorry. See, I'm elaborating.
It wasn't that part of the body where it bit me.
Okay. So but in a very serious vein, I'm curious if the boating scene is a powerful personal thing, and how you dealt with that in the context of what is a genre horror movie with colorful, crazy elements to it.
Well, I knew that the piece was a Gothic romance story. I do like that tradition, certainly in American literature. And I believe that every film I work on now should be personal, because one of the beauties of making a film is you learn so much about whatever subject matter you're working on. And as I've said, in some ways making a film is like asking a question. My last film, Tetro, I really learned a lot about this all-important relationship with my older brother that I had been simmering over, and making that film let me understand it in a perspective that I would never have guessed. In this story, I knew that there was no ending and that it was about kind of a murder, because that was the way the story seemed to be set up, but I didn't realize it was going to take me to something I haven't ever admitted to myself, which is my own. Every parent feels that they're responsible for whatever might happen to their kid, and you don't let yourself off on that. And I didn't realize how much I felt personally responsible for what had happened those 24 years ago, because I should have been there. And I didn't know I was gonna, when Poe really did appear in the dream, that wasn't a cute thing I did. I was in this dream, and all of a sudden it was like the Divine Comedy, and I'm following this extraordinary poet, and I knew enough about his life to know that his work was expression of a wound he had, but I didn't know what my wound was. I knew that we shared this little girl ghost, and somehow he even says, you're the resolution of this story, and I didn't know what that meant, but there on the cliff, which was inspired by his story Return to the Maelstrom, it was the time to own up to the fact that deep down in my heart, I felt responsible, because I could have gone. He wanted me to go. And somehow it just took me there, and I'm grateful, just as I said, as I was with Tetro, with the story of my brother, that I could have that understanding, whether I'll feel better, I don't know, but I do think parents, no matter what happens to the kid, they could say, oh, she had a cold in nursery school, you'll feel responsible. And in my case, I felt really responsible and felt it was appropriate to have the character that Hall was playing. I felt a lot like Hall Baltimore. My career is very bizarre. I'm very honored by people. They're very kind to me now that I'm older. They're very generous with me and stuff. But the truth of the matter is, throughout my career, I failed my way upwards. I was always in a dismal crisis. I was always getting bad reviews. I was always trying to figure out how am I going to support my family with the reaction. That journalist Frank Rich for the New York Times was a drama. He said Apocalypse Now was the biggest disaster Hollywood had ever attempted in 50 years. I said, you mean there's nothing worse than what I did? I mean, at least I had my heart in the right place. I mean, one of these movies you see that are just glib attempts to make a movie third time, Superman Part 2, which was coming out at the same time. Isn't that a bigger disaster? No, I had to have the biggest disaster in 40, 50 years. Now, Apocalypse Now is considered a classic. What's a guy to think? I mean, you have to accept that, yes, the culture just keeps moving, and if you try to stick out, if you're doing things that are a little different from what everybody else is doing, then you're going to stick out and you're going to be slapped on the wrist. But 30 years later, they're going to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award for the same thing you got fired for. So I'm comfortable with that, and cinema is too wonderful and too young, and it has too many surprises up its sleeve, and even the smart people who think they know what movies are, they don't know what movies are. No one does. It's going to happen. I like to say it's going to be your great-grandchildren are going to teach us what movies can be, because it's too young. Excuse me for my rambling answer. I hope I, somewhere in there, did address what you asked me.
Right next to you, yeah, go ahead.
Fabian Winter for Latin America. I have a question for Mr. Coppola. Having a daughter as a director like Sofia Coppola, did you think she ever would be this big as she is? And a follow-up question with that is, I remember when she did with you one of the Godfather movies. Is there any possibility that you could do a new Godfather movie with her as a director?
I have as much interest in a gangster movie or another Godfather film as I have in this glass of water, and I'm not thirsty. You know, I didn't enjoy making The Godfather. I was blessed to have an extraordinary cast at a time when the public was interested in that. But where does the idea come from that if you make a movie, you have to make 6 of them? That's a financial idea in News Corp. It has nothing to do with movies, you know? I mean, movies used to be you made The Best Years of Our Lives, and that was a movie. You didn't make The Best Years of Our Lives Part 7. Why would I be interested in doing something that I've already sort of, for myself, personally exhausted? And what about it? Sophia was a wonderful little girl. She had many interests. She was a painter. She was a good painter. She used to write stories. She did fashion. She was a beautiful girl. She was a fashion model. I saw her on the cover of Vogue when she was 19. Then she was a photographer for fashion. And she came to me as a 20-year-old girl, and she said, Dad, you know, I like to be a painter, and I want to be a photographer, and I want to design fashion, and I like to write stories. Should I focus on something? Am I just a dilettante? And I said, you know, Sophia, don't worry. Parents always say focus on something. Don't focus. Do all the things you love, and someday it will come together and you'll see what you are. And the things that you did, the painting and the fashion, will all be relevant. And then she made this short film a few years later, and I said, wow, she's got a lot of talent. You know, beautiful short film called Lick the Star. And then she made The Virgin Suicides here in Toronto, which I thought was such a, you know, complex novel, tricky novel, and she made such a beautiful poetic film. So most of all, I'm proud of my children that they feel that filmmaking is something personal, and that you don't see them trying to make the next, whatever the next thing to do is. You know, each film Sophia makes, you could just look at a little bit and know that she made it. You know, it has her style.
We'll go right here.
I was at the In Conversation talk yesterday, very good one. And you talked a little bit about working with actors and rehearsal and improvisation. I'm wondering, how much input do you give an actor, and when do you know that it's too much? How much room do you give them to sort of figure things out on their own?
My experience always was that during the rehearsal process, you know, the actor is unsure. A story I love to tell is the wonderful director Billy Friedkin was working on The French Connection. And Gene Hackman told me that he didn't know who the hell he was. He said, I got a funny pork pie hat, and I was running around and being a tough cop. And he said, I didn't know who I was. And then one day, early in the morning, it was very cold, and I went and I took a donut and a cup of coffee, and I dipped the donut in the cup of coffee and took a bite and threw the donut away. And a voice behind me said, that's him. And it was Billy Friedkin who was watching. And that was when the character crystallized. And Gene Hackman said, once Billy said, that's him, I knew who I was. So the actor, I think, does operate, especially if there's rehearsal in the early part of the rehearsal, or if there is no rehearsal in the first few days of the shooting, without knowing what they're doing, and then some critical mass happens that.
Yeah, can you speak to that as well, Val?
Well, when you're working together, as we were, when the actor's working with the director, when it's a real director, you're trying to please them. You're trying to figure out what makes them say, yes, that's the guy or that's the scene. And then you also want to be free, and you ideally want, and you don't always get it, most often not, where the director allows you to be free to not know what's happening, because that's what we're all going through. You want to be present in the scene and having these strange kind of secrets in your head that when the circumstance, the action, or the artificial construction of the scene happens, you have an honest reaction. And with Francis, he's so good at his job. I'm laughing because it's not like a job. Yeah, come in or not, and it's like we're not really on a set, because in your mind you're not really on a set, you're in the experience. He has a way where it's so comfortable that you're not involved in the same kind of regular anxiety that you have to get over anyway. So you're looking for ways to also then fight against the whole construct, which means the writing as well, your own preconceived ideas about being good or what the director thinks is good, and be willing to, be criticized by a mighty man, which he never did once, ever criticize me. Never.
I should have.
Yeah.
We just have time for one more question, and I'm going to go right here. Thank you.
Hi, Claude Boudin with France 2. Mr. Coppola, you have experience with a lot of festivals around the world, Cannes, Berlin, Venice. How does the Toronto Film Festival compare to the other festivals? What has been your experience so far, and what makes it different?
It does seem, in these situations, you're very sequestered and you're kind of shoved around from place to place. And my feeling, my instinct was, of course, it was such a big theater yesterday, and there was so many people that I felt there was more sense of a population from the area as really being a festival of the people who live here. I don't know if that's true, but that was my impression, that it was film festivals are complicated business relationships between elements of the community, but in this case I felt the Toronto people were, it was their festival more, and I felt more access of the population, which was nice.
Val, you've been here before, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, certainly, and I think others. What's your take on the festival?
Exactly the same. It just feels like Toronto is I don't know how to say it without sounding like criticizing other festivals. It just feels like a real film festival for the community that's also a really big international film festival. It's, there are other festivals that have their own great character, but I was really happy to find out this is where we were coming. And yesterday was surprising. I don't know why. I just thought we'd be in a smaller theater because of our little movie, but it was grand.
It was the premiere of the film. It felt like a premiere to me. I hadn't seen the print because my daughter was getting married in Italy, and I was kind of giving instructions for the final sound and picture from the south of Italy, and so this was really. When I sat down, this was a chance to see the movie all finished on such a big screen with such a...
What was your first reaction for seeing it for the first time that way?
Well, I was, you can't separate the audience from the movie at that point. I mean, you never can separate the audience from the movie, and the audience was so alive and receptive. It reminds me of a funny experience I had when we were here taking a lot of flack on One from the Heart after we took a lot of flack on Apocalypse Now, and sometimes you get desperate. There's just so much flack and talk about how terrible your movie is that it hasn't even come out, that you don't know what to do. And so finally I decided to rent the Radio City musical, which we had done on Napoleon. We had the screening of Radio City musical, and we had and it was lines around the block, and everyone came to see this movie, and the whole Radio City musical's got to be, 6,000 people, and there's One from the Heart, and the audience is seems so, the first few tense moments, and then there's a laugh, and then there's the music, and Tom Waits singing the song, and it went, so the audience was just laughing and applauding, and when it was over, they gave it a standing ovation, and as I went through the room, I said, I can't believe I've survived this. Joseph Papp runs through the crowd and says, Francis, this movie is a total daring monument, congratulations, so-and-so, and then someone else, I don't know, Leonard Bernstein or some great, and I'm walking, and they're leading me to the press conference, and I'm like emotionally like a washcloth. I was so scared, and So there had been such bad talk about the movie. And I get there, and there's a press conference, and there's a hand, and a journalist gets up and says, well, Mr. Coppola, how do you feel now that you know that no one likes your movie? And I said, well, gee, I thought it was, Joseph Pam. And I realized that there's the opinion of the audience, but then there's the real opinion. And of course, the real opinion on One from the Heart was devastating. So I'm sort of inured to this, this thing. But to have a wonderful audience response to a movie is what you dream of.
That's all our time. Thank you very much. It's been such a treat and such an honor to sit here with you. Francis Ford Coppola, Val Kilmer, thank you so much. And if we can get everyone to remain seated until our guests have left, we'll let you know when you can go. Thank you very much.